happy books I read in May. It's now June. And we're going to talk about these today. The window units are in, which is thrilling. They've been cooling the house all day and are now turned off for the sake of the sound. I'm not really sold on this t-shirt, so if you have opinions about it, specifically negative ones, kind of me too. It's like shaped perfectly, which is kind of hard to find, and it was $11 at Old Navy. But it's one of those nonsense shirts. It says Field Journal Perennial Collection, which I think means nothing. So, also the flowers are a little bit like sincere. But I was deciding about it, and then I had to get dressed for this, and then I was like, well, I can't just leave the tag on while I'm talking on this video for all this time, letting it itch me. And it might have been final sale anyway, so we have committed. Nothing against Old Navy though, because these are my new favorite shorts, and every summer I find a pair of shorts there and I get like 5 of them. So because it's warm, we've got the ice packs per usual. I was flipping through a copy of Lena Dunham's memoir, and she talks about the whole EDS body temperature thing, which I also wrote about in my last Substack post, my May Substack post, and she reposted it on Substack, which was like so goofy and fun. So that was a cool, fun one to write about. I've got this is like the disability section of my nonfiction, which one of these days we'll like talk through all the organization, but let's get going. I decided to do the books in the order I think I want to say the least about them in, such that I can save the most time for the books that deserve the most time, specifically these two, which to read at the same time was unbelievable. I totally leapt into it, and so we're going to be aiming for that by starting with this, which is a middle grade book that I read called Wilderness Hacks by Jocelyn Brorson, and it's about 2 kids who go out in the wilderness, and then there's an earthquake that causes a flood that causes them to be in actual survival mode, and it was fine. It did not shine. It was pretty well paced. It was interesting. It didn't like super get me. There were a couple times where they were like talking like therapy speak, way more mature than I felt like a 12 or 13-year-old like would do that. But that's all I have to say. That was fast. That was very fast. Praises self. That was the only one from this month I put in this book. But next month, let me tell ya, there are already 2 arcs that I DNF'd and a big fantasy book, which is no surprise at this point. Next up, we'll do, I have to get books down for 2 of these actually, so I'll do that. Well, yeah. Okay. Next, we'll do Foster by Claire Keegan. So Claire Keegan teaches at Trinity College Dublin, and she writes little bitty novellas. As Teddy has pointed out, she's like the only person the publishing industry will still publish novellas for, basically. It's really hard to get a book like this out in the world and then bought, but maybe it will create more space for that because hers are great, and it's really cool to have a book that you can read pretty quickly. So Small Things Like These I read last January, and it was lovely. There's a movie out. You can listen to the book fair episode on this and on the movie. And then I read Foster because I actually don't remember why I was like prioritized this kind of out of nowhere, but the book fair pod girls loved it too. Thank you, Kat and Ash. And I guess that's why. It was precious. That can't be the only thing I have to say. It's a story of love of a young girl who is sent to live with another family for the summer, kind of a distant relative family, and the rhythms and patterns and daily life that she lives there, and the love that grows. It was simple, but it's hard to execute something simply really, really well. I'm thinking about how I feel like in cooking movies they talk about an omelet. Maybe this is the 100-foot, there's some cooking movie called like the 100-foot something, and it's these two restaurants that are across the street in France. I remember it being cute. Anyway, there's something in that about like you can tell if a chef is like good if they can make you a good omelet or something. That's what I'm thinking about. Claire Keegan can make a good omelet. I mailed this to my dad, like, I guess for Father's Day, and it was good. It was really good. So I'd recommend it. It's set in present day Ireland. I think most of Claire Keegan's stuff is set in Ireland, but the next one we can talk about is Mockingjay. So I finished the Hunger Games series. 30 years later, this one hit the least for me. I think it's pretty politics-y and it's pretty gray. I don't like it when a book is really colorless. And when you get to the Capitol, I didn't think she switched you into like the color mode of the fact that the Capitol was really colorful, very clearly. This was intense, but not as moving, engrossing as the other two. Some confusing sentences, the first part felt slow, which is true. And then I did note that it suffered from a little bit of the problem with the third, not problem, these books are perfect. The problem with the third Deadly Education book, which is that your main two people are not in the same room for most of the book. And that's really devastating in this one because it's really fun when they're together. Do not spoil things. And same thing with Peeta and Katniss. In this, Peeta's like not in it a lot. And anyway, she, I think, I don't want to say like has improved a lot, but I read Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which she wrote like years after this one. And I thought that book was like pretty perfect. So that's fun. This will go up in YA. And then I haven't read the one about Haymitch yet, but could be a fun time. Next, I'm gonna talk about, we'll just do this one. This is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. It is about what it sounds like, a woman who works in a convenience store in Japan. And the culture in Japan around convenience stores is very specific, and I've never been there. So this was sort of my first entrance into that. But I think a lot of the 7-Elevens and stuff have also gone viral online. So maybe everybody else has seen videos of Tokyo convenience stores. But this is about a woman. She sees a convenience store that's going to open when she's finishing high school, I think, and she applies. She gets hired, she gets trained, and she really loves the training because it teaches her exactly how to interact and how to be, and there's very specific structures for how to behave, and that is super helpful for her. And so she stays working at the convenience store for years, and the book mostly takes place after she's been there for like 18 years. And in a moment in her life where she starts to not necessarily wander of her own volition, but because of the pressures of other people, whether she ought to be doing something else. And it was really well executed. I have a thing against books about writers and books that take any other type of shortcut to be about life. And I had 2 books this month that ducked that easy way to fail really well, and this was one of them. To explore the way you spend your time and the way you earn money and the way you interact with the people around you, especially when you're awkward or neurodivergent or whatever this narrator is, through a normal job, like working at a convenience store, worked so well for me. And this author did such a great job. She has worked at a convenience store, I think, briefly, and pulled from that. There's this really, one of the characters that creates some tension, sort of like as a fit with our main character, and then eventually as a foil, which isn't really a spoiler, is this guy who's basically an incel, and he just like constantly acts like he's the victim, and like the whole world like is against him and won't work for him. And having that type of attitude that is put next to, I think Kaiko is the main character's name, and she has such this clear logic about like, I don't know why society does things this way, and he thinks the same thing, and to see where their opinions end up diverging in the way that like you have to choose to belong, and to choose to belong to the thing that works for you. And for her, that's the convenience store. And that there are people who realize that the world is repetitive or loud or annoying, but don't ever choose to also see it as worth it. And that was his character. And then her character was so weird, which is not a diss. You know, when they put like derogatory in parentheses, like whatever, celebratory would be in the parentheses after that. And it was great. It was worth a read. It was an easy read. And thank you, Teddy and It Reads Too Much, for the recommendation. Okay, next up is The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon, Volume 5. So we've got 1 through 4 right here, and I've shared these with so many people now that Casey and Alexis and my friends are getting ahead of me, and they're like, we need to talk about what happens in this one and this one and this one. So I really sort of treasure and read things slowly. I still haven't finished like the last one of these that I'm just like saving, and so I don't usually do that, but I'm kind of going in between here. I am partially reading them fast so we can chat, but anyway, I read this one. It was lovely and perfect, like they all are. I think these are phenomenal. They're starting to take off, and so it's getting to the point at the shop where people are like, oh, I've seen those online, and then I explain that sometimes online gets it right in a way that's extraordinary. And if there's other TikTok books that were very silly, which there were, that this is not one of them. It must be rescued from the sludge. So these are great. There was a really sweet line. Oh, okay. I'm so down bad for these books. There's this line where, what can I say? This is a quote about a father. Quote from a father about his daughter. He said he wished you to be wise and good and true to the beatings of your own heart, and hoped that you could be spared the extremes of society, both the very poor and the very rich, so that neither need nor indulgence would spoil the soul he loved more than anything else in the world. Which is a beautiful wish, a beautiful part of the story. So I still recommend those completely. We are blazing, people, which is to say nothing because we have 3 heavy hitters coming up. What would be a better, what's a gentle metaphor? We have 3 prize-winning baked goods coming up. I guess you could just say really good ones, but next up. Also, if I'm not looking at the camera very well, I don't like when people's glasses reflect back light and you can't see their eyes, which happens on video. So I don't have my glasses on right now, so I really can't see. So the whole world is in soft focus, which is helpful in like a dance class, but for this, if I'm like just kind of acting like the world ends right here. It's kind of because it does. So I will try to go get more contacts at some point. I've been saying that for 2 months or 3. Tara Bastone, Ready or Not was great. I also, I love a romance that's low stakes more than one that's like dating a billionaire, dating a Cubs player. Like, I'm not excited about that. This one I have been excited about since the cover was released. I missed her middle. So she wrote this one. Then I didn't read Promise Me Sunshine. Then I got this one. And it was so good. So now I'm going to go back and read Promise Me Sunshine next time I want one. But what do you need to know? I think I'm going to read you. This worked. Wow, yes. The beginning was slow, but every promise she made, she kept with aplomb. The inserts were, there's, not spoiling, inserts in a different font, and the husband is speaking, and you can tell he's somewhere. And I thought for the first couple that he was at therapy, and I was rolling my eyes because we know what I think about therapy, which is I think about having books where people are writers, which is that it's a shortcut and it is not very creative. And then it turns out it wasn't therapy, and then the way that it tied into the story was really cool, and they both had, he had that thing, and she starts taking a figure drawing class, like almost on accident, and that becomes a way that she sees the world. And I think it's really important to be creative, and so to have two adults like discover different creative things that they loved and then have that help them understand themselves and understand each other just was really beautiful, and it was done really well. I don't know if I'd even realized that until I just said it. Add to that Bastone, the author, having a tone and sense of both levity and gravity that I consider perfect. And looks like I'll be going back for Promise Me Sunshine. I also gasped at one point in this book with one reveal, which is hard to do, and it's hard to do that and not have it be gimmicky. I really thought this worked. It really was slow for a while, which is pretty common in a marriage and distress trope, because you have to like really establish that there's something at stake here. And it was set in New York, and yet just like Ready or Not, it really succeeded in like this is normal people. She worked in recipes for a food bank or for the charitable food system, where she takes the ingredients that they get from their, restaurant cast offs or Trader Joe's expired or whatever, and makes recipes so that people can use the food. And he is I'm gonna say electrician. I don't remember exactly because you never go to work with Ben, but it was wonderful. And I loved it. Oh, honey, wrong pile. Yeah, that was a good one. Okay, Pachinko. I finally did it. Then we're gonna talk about these two, and then, okay. Gorgeous. I can make it gorgeous. Okay, so this book, if you've never heard of it, is called Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. It came out in, I think, 2019, and 2017, really prioritized it because it was on Roxane Gay's list of best 10 books of the 21st century. That is where we found Salvage the Bones. That is where we found State of Wonder. I read In W by Zadie Smith because it was on that list. I don't know if I talk about this every time I read one of these books, and then I try to remember the whole list from memory. The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay was on that list. That one deserves to come down and visit. And then there's a couple more that I'm still going to read. Oh my gosh, this book is so thick. So here's State of Wonder, which someone at the shop just told me they read for book club and no one in their book club liked, which is fine. It was a great book. So this book is so good. And there's one more that I read. Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado, who wrote this book, which is better. I feel okay saying that, even though it's rather sweeping. So, next book on my list was Pachinko. This is the anniversary edition. So I feel like we've talked about this. Maybe we've talked about this before. Books are released in hardcover right when they come out. So Wilderness Hacks would be an example of that. This is true for most books. Then, once their sales slow down, or after a year, whichever comes later, they are released in paperback. So if you're in a store and you're like, do you have this in paperback yet? The answer is almost always no. Very rarely does a new bookstore keep hardcovers once the book is out in paperback. But exceptions to that are one, genre fiction. So some thrillers come out only in paperback, some like middle grade and kids books only come out in paperback, some romances only come out in paperback. So this one was one of those. It's pretty new. And then the other exception that comes to mind right now is anniversary editions. So when your book is a big enough deal, they'll release an anniversary edition, like our Pink Bad Feminist, which is the same cover design, but it says 10th anniversary edition, and obviously I have both. Love you. So Pachinko is a big enough deal. It got a re-release. Sometimes they put the number. This one doesn't say what number anniversary it is. So what if it's just a re-release in hardcover out of love, not for specific anniversary? It doesn't matter to us. Actually it does though, because I think that there's a new cover that just came out that's also hardcover, and I do not think it looks nice at all. So if you want Pachinko and you don't want the paperback, which is blue and has this person on it, and if you don't want this big blue hardcover thing with the red on it, order this cover specifically because it's gorgeous. So, nope, you need to know one more thing. This is Pachinko. I did not know why it was called Pachinko, much less know the word Pachinko, until about this far into the book, which is so cool. It's not important to the story or anything, because if you are from Japan or Korea, you might already know the word. It's a type of pinball gambling type game, and they had pachinko parlors, so you would go and it's sort of like slot machines where you sit and pick which way like the balls are going to go. I looked it up on YouTube after I read the book because I wanted to know what it looks like. It turns out this is what it looks like. This is a pachinko game, and picture a little bitty like marble shaped thing. They fall down through here and then they bounce through the pins different ways, and that's the game. So there you go. I'm already talking so long about books I love more, but I'm not even on to the book yet. So this book is set starting in it's a multi-generational family saga, which I assumed meant like you follow this parent and then their kid and then their kid and then their kid. But you follow one character the most, which is great because we want, the people in our families to live. And that makes sense, that it's not like the generation above you gets eliminated or something when you start following this new person. So basically you hear a brief paragraph about these people and these people, and then they have a daughter named Sunja, very early, page 3. And she is a woman you follow for the rest of the book. She has kids who have kids, and so that's the multi-generations, but Sunja is your constant, is your through line. Min Jin Lee does an amazing job of third person omniscient perspective. So don't want to say Sunja is your main person, because there will be whole sections where you follow her son, a friend of her son, a parent that you haven't seen in a while, another character who's kind of trying to change some things about their life. And it's so expertly done. Like reading a book like this gives so much extra fuel to my willingness to quit books that don't work for me, because there are books like this in the world that I could be reading instead. And in June right now, I just DNF'd a book that wasn't even that bad, but it was a 3-star book. And this is what I did with Will of the Mini, actually. I DNF'd after 90 pages, and I knew I could have kept reading it, but I knew it wasn't going to get any better. And I would rather read a book that's going to be transcendent. And so last month I quit A Year of Marvelous Ways. By last month I mean like yesterday. In June, I quit A Year of Marvelous Ways because I just finished Lily King's Writers and Lovers, and I had Lily King's Heart the Lover on deck. And I was like, why am I not reading Lily King? Why am I reading this mess? So Min Jin Lee is so good at having everything exactly where it needs to be, and having you know what you need to know. And third person omniscient is when you're following different people and the author is using they pronouns. So like Sunja went to the store, and then she, third person singular, bought kimchi, and she and her sister went to the butcher, and they saw this guy who's flirting with them. What makes it omniscient is that you can see inside the characters' heads, and the author tells you what they're feeling. What's really cool about doing that from third person and from switching perspectives is that, so omniscient means all-knowing, and you really know everything the author wants you to know, but you get to see when characters disagree with each other, or when they say something but they think something else, or when there's a moment where a character's brother comes to town and you are getting to see him receive his brother into his city, even though you've mostly been following the brother up into this point. And so it's a really quick way to get to know Yoseb, I think is the character's name, and you get to see the way that like different people feel differently about the world and what's happening in it and what they think they need. And it's beautiful. So the other thing that really astounded me about this book, which I'd been really intimidated because it's so long. And then Lisa finished it on Goodreads. I was like, oh, I've been needing to do that. And she was like, I read it. I said, I'm nervous because it's so long. And she was like, I read it in a week. I was like, what? It reads so fast because the sentences are, they are short. Many of them are short and simple constructions, and the author's tone is very matter of fact, even though the content of the book is incredibly dramatic. And that juxtaposition is so powerful. I read the entire book and did not cry until the last page, which is an unbelievable level of control to modulate the emotion that you're feeding the reader to such a degree that I don't think that's ever happened to me before. And I was so impressed with this book. There's a saying that is used a lot in book reviews, which is sweeping yet intimate. And it's kind of a cliche now, but this book is absolutely that. I could talk forever about all of the characters in it, all of the character transformation, which is of course the point of the story, all of the amazing pieces. And it's really fun to have a piece of fiction that rewards such a concentrated level of analysis and thought, and everyone should read it. And also I could talk about the actual insides of the book for a long time, but I won't. Oh my gosh, okay. I'm kind of nervous about this. These two books, when I told Teddy I was reading them at the same time, she was like, that's like a syllabus level situation. And I was like, you're absolutely right. I also found out the type of damage on a book that bothers me. A lot of books come through the shop that are considered damaged, and I take them, and I don't think the damage is annoying. I don't care if the cover's ripped, I don't care if the edge is banged up, but I learned from this copy that what does bother me is when the jacket flap is folded wrong, and so the spine doesn't sit in the right spot. That's annoying to me. And look, there's all this extra room right here that's black, and you could just like, anyway. So I had both of these books in my head for a while. This one Teddy had read when Roxane Gay picked it for one of her earliest book clubs, and she was like, okay, sorry, it's How to Read Now by Elaine Castillo and Recollections of My Non-Existence by Rebecca Solnit. How to Read Now, Teddy had said, like, it's phenomenal. You have to read it, you're gonna love it. And I was like, great. But I also have a lot of nonfiction, and essays take a lot of focus, and so I just kind of let it float. I didn't buy it. And Maddie Brown read it. She said it was amazing. Lo read it, same thing. So still, I never bought it. Then Teddy goes through her books and has 2 copies of this one. Gives this one to me. I bring it home. It's sitting in my nonfiction. I'm like, I don't think I'm ever gonna read that. And I don't like to have books that I'm not gonna read. So I was gonna get rid of it. So I read the first page, and then I'm like, whoa. Then I read the second page, then I read the third page, and I'm like, whoa. Then every feminist writer that I'm interested in keeps quoting from Rebecca Solnit. So I'm reading High Heeled. It's like Rebecca Solnit, who wrote a book about the history of walking and women walking, which is so specific and interesting, and everything she said about her in this book was amazing. Then I was reading Good Woman, and she's like, this one, or it's in, it might have been in Svalbard's book, but it's also in The Portable Feminist Reader, which was edited by Roxane Gay. This is a collection of important essays that I've been putting off reading for a long time because it's going to be a lot of focus. And anyway, when I was like, am I going to read this? Am I going to get rid of it? Then I decided to read an essay called Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Solnit. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was phenomenal. What on earth? It was so powerful. So Rebecca Solnit just kept coming up. And people who I'm really interested in their thoughts think that her thoughts are very interesting. And so I kept keeping the book and kept not reading it. Don't remember what made me pull it. And then this got picked for a book club at the store. And then I had them both. And I started reading them both at the beginning of April. And oh my gosh. So I'm going to read 3 things from each book, which is a lot. And then we're going to see where we're at. Okay. We're going to start with How to Read Now by Elaine Castillo. Post-2020, it feels impossibly hard and incalculably stupid to say that you love the world. Why bother? Why does reading matter? Why does truly trying to know the world we live in, the history that makes us, matter? It feels impossibly hard and incalculably stupid to commit to that love, to bear it and be borne by it, but that is what I feel. It is the wellspring that reading leads me to every time. Loving this world, loving being alive in it, means living up to that world, living up to that love. I can't say I love this world or living in it if I don't bother to know it, indeed, be known by it. It's that mutual promise of knowing that reading holds us in, an inheritance that belongs to us, whether we accept it or not. This book, whether we read its pages or not, this book remains just one small part of that work, that inheritance, and that love. And much of this is really logical, really not as full of heart as that section was. It's a good one to start with. This is from her next essay called Reading Teaches Us Empathy and Other Fictions. The idea that fiction builds empathy is one of incomplete politics, left hanging by probably good intentions. The problem with this type of reading is that in its practical application, usually readers are encouraged to read writers of a demographic minority in order to learn things, which is to say, as a supplement for their empathy muscles. A metabolic exchange that turns writers of color into little more than ethnographers, personal trainers, to continue the metaphor. The result is that we largely end up going to writers of color to learn the specific and go to white writers to feel the universal. The problem is, if we need fiction to teach us empathy, we don't really have empathy. Because empathy is not a one-stop destination, it's a practice, ongoing, which requires work from us in our daily lives, for our daily lives, not just when we're confronted with the visibly and legibly other. Then there's an essay about treaty. Oh, shoot. Oh, this one gets so good. Okay, she starts talking about this guy who won the Nobel Peace Prize, and everyone's like, well, he's kind of fascist. And then this one columnist wrote this thing that was like, but I'm still going to read his non-political works. And then she reads one of those books and does a close reading on it and just like destroys it so phenomenally. It was so interesting. And then you're like, that's that. But I'm not going to read that because I have too much other stuff I want to read. She talks about Honor the Treaty. She goes to New Zealand, and it's about the different ways that New Zealand engages with and honors their Aboriginal or Native populations. And it was great. Oh, this is a good random line. She's talking about monuments and stuff. No, I said I was only going to read 3. We gotta be... Okay, this essay was called The Limits of White Fantasy, and she talks about fantasy novels, and then she does a close read of Watchmen, which is partially set in Tulsa, and praises part of its really nuanced engagement with race, and then questions another part of its engagement with race that was less effective. I don't know why I'm saying that like I'm gonna spoil Watchmen, a show that came out 100 years ago, but, well, like 8. Anyway. Then she wrote this one called Main Character Syndrome, where she roasts Joan Didion to heaven and back. So it was amazing because what happens when you do a close read of someone's work is that they tell you what you need to know about them and about their work. And Elaine Castillo is from, I think her family has ties between the Philippines, Hawaii, and California. Joan Didion is famously between Hawaii, California, and New York. I had this funny moment where I started to look for Slouching Towards Bethlehem, and I couldn't find it, and I realized I moved it into the closet, which is like the reject section. And then I was reading this really intelligent woman's takedown of lit girl fave Joan Didion, and I was like, yeah, I already put her in the closet. Sorry, Joan. Which is a silly little moment of self-righteousness, but I thought her... But see, I don't want to read that from that essay either. I'm working to get to this one that's later, but basically if you, if that sounds interesting to you, then you should read that essay. And it's so good because it's about how Joan Didion does not, like she writes, oh, stop. Read it. Just go read it. And she talks about how she writes about the West as this place that's just like empty, which is so messed up when you think about the fact that indigenous populations live there. Anyway, and then guess who else is writing about the West? Rebecca Solnit. Destroying it. Doing amazing. Then there's one called Reality Is All We Have to Love. Oh, and she talks about being in grad school in London, and that was great. Oh, and she does a close read of this random short story. Guys, okay, so when you're an English major, you read many books and sections of books and theory, which is way up there. And then you take a text, and what it is to be an English major is to read the text closely and then make an argument about it, juxtapose it with another text, take theory and overlay it and say something interesting. And it's crazy how much you learn from doing that and building that muscle. I remember the first couple times I had to invent something is basically what you're doing, and it felt so and is so different from writing a 5-paragraph essay, which is kind of how you learn how to start writing. And you have like an intro, and you're like, my first one in 5th grade was about Alexander the Great. So you're like, Alexander the Great was good at war, valued scholarship, and blah blah blah, and then each paragraph does one of those things. But to be presented with and to say something interesting about texts that have been around for a long time, you have to read them really closely. And then what you end up doing in your paper is pulling out quotations from the book that support the argument that you're making. And it's kind of magical. And then also you'll get papers back and your professors are like, you haven't said anything. And then you're like, you're right. And so you have to go deeper and think harder. And that is just like an incredible experience and such a privilege. And that's what so much of this book is. She's close reading, like I said, Watchmen, some film, some text, and whenever you read something like this that's so phenomenally done, it is just such a privilege. So okay, no, this gonna be the last thing I read? Okay, yeah, okay. She does a close read of a short story called Woven Sir about a young boy remembering his instructor from when he was a kid, and it's all kind of, it's a little bit fuzzy. The short story, the memory, the question of whether the relationship between the teacher and student was inappropriate or not. And then she's also talking about her experience, I think it was in this essay, at her grad school in London, where the class is like not interested in reading something carefully. So she reads The Turn of the Screw. To this day, it remains one of my favorite stories about what storytelling, trauma, and being believed have to do with each other. She gets to class and the teacher's like, who did the reading? And then before anyone else in the class could respond with more than groans, she continued, oh, I know, right? You know what? Conspiratorial giggle. This week, it's totally fine if you haven't read the assignment. His sentences are so long and difficult, aren't they? I remember sinking in my seat. This was the second semester of my program, and I'd already spent the entire first semester doing the thing that all kids of color are taught to do: work twice as hard, be twice as good. And she's been doing all this reading, and then she realizes that no one else cares about reading and reading well and reading closely. So she just, anyway, then she does a close read of Woven Sir. Then she says this: I know there is a material difference between the politicized intellectual silence of a writing classroom, so like her story in London, or a literary reader, and an institution's bureaucratic silence in the face of widespread sexual harassment of its students. So she's told the story of her in the classroom. She's also told the story about that grad school, and why she went there was because this writer that she loved had gone there. She only found out later that that writer had left because of sexual harassment not being taken care of by the school or something like that. These two things are not the same violence, but they are kindred. And we talked about this when we talked about Lost and Lassoed, or whatever that book was called, where I was like, why are we having men in romance novels beat up other men for, looking sideways at their love interest when that violence is kindred, is a great word for it, with the violence that has them perceiving those men as dangerous to women in the first place. Like they as the good guy are acting entitled to violence as well. Not the same violence, but they are kindred. One silences the art, which would be like, we're not going to talk about this reading. One silences the person who might make that art. And when the two are combined and given institutional power and status, those violences become environmental. They become a culture. Which, yeah. It falls on us to live in that culture and to dismantle it. To revoke that culture's too long enjoyed permission not to know. Not to know that reality, which is the enemy of the powerful, and which is all there is for us to love. There where loving is a kind of knowing, and knowing a kind of loving. Oh my gosh, what a way to land the plane. So she's taking this really obscure short story, and she's taking her experiences at this grad school, and she's synthesizing all of that into this really fantastic argument about the way that we read the world around us and the way that we do and don't listen to certain people, and the importance of thinking deeply in reading a short story in class, and also reading and listening to someone tell you that their professor is harassing them, and how all those things are connected. It's so good. And that takes me to the quote from nonfiction that I just flipped to from this that I have no way I'm going to be able to find. Oh, I found the quote. Nonfiction is at its best an act of putting the world back together, or tearing some piece of it apart to find what's hidden beneath the assumptions or conventions. And in this sense, creation and destruction can be akin. The process can be incandescent with excitement, whether from finding some unexpected scrap of information or from recognizing the patterns that begin to arise as the fragments begin to assemble. In a way, this has been my life's work, the pursuit of patterns and the work of reconnecting what has been fractured. Which will be our bridge, even though it's not the quote and I didn't find the real quote. I don't think I finished. Okay. It's getting warm. It's warm in here, so I have to stick to my 3 and move on. Okay, recollections of non-existence. Rebecca Solnit, recollections of my non-existence. Guys, this was so good. And I have never read I'm going to read from it. Like I said, I was going to read from it. And then, and only then, this is about reading. I think she just referenced the essay that I was just talking about. Oh, I didn't even get to tell you that story. I think she just referenced the writer who wrote Wovenser Berger. See, I don't know who Berger is. Guys. So, John Berger, the author of Wovenser, which contains the quote, "Reality is all we have to love," is referenced here by Rebecca Solnit. She's talking about W.E.B. Du Bois' idea of double consciousness, which is used for Black experience and white culture, and James Baldwin followed up on that. And then, Du Bois' framework found an echo in John Berger's 1972 essay book, Ways of Seeing, when Berger imagined, with generosity and brilliance, what it was to be something he had never been. This is his quote. "To be born a woman has been to be born within an allotted and confined space into the keeping of men. The social presence of women has developed as a result of their ingenuity in living under such tutelage with such a limited space. But this has been at the cost of a woman's self being split in two. A woman must continually watch herself. She is almost continuously accompanied by her own image of herself. She has to survey everything she is and everything she does, because how she appears to others, and ultimately how she appears to men, is of crucial importance for what is normally thought of as the success of her life." Which, I mean, get that I Quit Shaking article, get my Heather Widow's book. Yes, the beauty requirements in the world are real. Her own sense of being in herself is supplanted by a sense of being appreciated as herself by another. Which is an incredible quote. Great work, John, buddy of both books. Slow down. What am I reading? What do I want to read? You depend on, okay, so she's talking about reading books and women are barely in the books like Moby Dick or Lord of the Rings. She says, being so often required to be someone else can stretch thin the sense of self. You should be yourself some of the time. You should be with people who are like you, who are facing what you're facing, who recognize you. And then other times you should be like people unlike yourself. Because there is a problem as well with those who spend too little time being anyone else. It stunts the imagination in which empathy takes root. That empathy that is a capacity to shapeshift and roam out of yourself. One of the convenient afflictions of power is a lack of this imaginative extension. For many men, it begins in early childhood, with almost exclusively being given stories with male protagonists. That was cool. Okay. The last one I'm gonna do is one I've thought about so often since I finished this book. When you pursue creative work, immortality is often held up as an ideal. You're supposed to aspire to make something that will be recognized and that will, as they say, keep your name alive. And it's true that words are alive when they're read or heard. But I learned from the artists I researched and wrote about and the movements that changed the culture that there are two ways of making contributions that matter. One is to make work that stays visible before people's eyes. The other is to make work that is so deeply absorbed that it ceases to be what people see and becomes how they see. It is no longer in front of them, it's inside them. It is no longer the artist, it's the people who are no longer only the audience. Works of art that had an impact in their time sometimes look dated or obvious because what was fresh and even insurrectionary about them has become the ordinary way things are. Thus, the vision of one or a few becomes the perspective of many. They have been rendered obsolete by their success. Guys, okay, that was three for each. I mean, the most important thing to say is to read these books and then read them again. I'll talk a little bit about the reading experience in case you need to know which one to prioritize. This one it leaned more academic. It is an essay collection. This one is a memoir, which is usually a little more narrative. We'll come to that later, though it's not quite true. This one was so reflective for a memoir. Oftentimes, you'll read what makes a memoir powerful is the reflections that you imbue into every paragraph or every story. So when you read Know My Name or when you read Nobody's Girl, you're gonna have her telling you, okay, I was hanging out with my sister and this happened. But then she's gonna give you a sentence that's like, and the reason that this is questioned later in the court is because of this, but that doesn't actually make sense because when you are a woman, you should be able to eat quinoa and then go to a party and not be sexually assaulted, or whatever the individual moments are where she sews in little bits of thinking about the world and saying something bigger, which is what memoir is. If a story, especially fiction, but all stories about character transformation, right? A memoir is going to have character transformation, and because you're the one writing it about yourself, you can spell that out within every section. And a memoir that's going to be less successful is going to be one that oftentimes sticks too closely to narrative and chronology in terms of saying, we went to the grocery store this day and then we did this day and whatever, versus getting in there and breaking down for you and analyzing for you what you need to know and giving you wisdom. Okay, we can't talk about all the memoirs on the wall, but this one was so much reflection that I didn't realize until the end that it was still chronological, which is really crazy. Every section had 3 or 4 chapters, and then the section had a title. She starts when she moves into her own apartment for the first time at age 19, and she's living in San Francisco. She finds an apartment and ends up living there for like 17 years. And that, you just have to read it. You have to read it. She's moved into a Black neighborhood in San Francisco, and over the course of the time that she's there, it gentrifies pretty astoundingly, even though this is still like pre-Silicon Valley. And she has this line that's like, in order to perceive change, you have to move slower than it, which is a great line. So she's in this, basically she says it's like a transplanted, many people from the South who have moved to San Francisco. And so she's talking with so much like love and respect about the neighborhood and about the churches. And there's this one called New Strangers Baptist Church or something. And that's one of the incredible like phrases that she, anyway, it was chronological. The essays were so full of reflection that they didn't come across as narrative. I actually could not suss out how she structured them, which is kind of like a magic trick. I guess I could really sit with it, and I would have to circle every topic sentence and then read them all in a row and then see where she took us and then do that for every single, and I'm not gonna do all that, Sometimes you can just let the magic trick happen in front of you, but oftentimes, even with a memoir that's fantastic, like this one, you can tell what's happening when. And sometimes she's already in the pile? Yeah. Every genre convention gets broken by the form of the memoir, and nothing like that has ever been done before. So, fun times. So, if you want to read really challenging essays, but you just keep not, is she talking about herself? Because you don't have that level or like that amount of time to focus like that, you could read this one because it talks so much about the environmental movement and the feminist movement and things that matter deeply, and she's such a deep thinker, and she's seen a lot. Like, she's in her 60s now and is writing about her 20s and 30s, and I thought that was so cool for a memoir because it's pretty unusual. A lot of memoirs are written, I mean this one and Nobody's Girl, pretty shortly after the events of the memoir take place, which is not a problem, but it does make reading something like this really special, especially because she's written like dozens of books, and so her ability to write a book with magic trick, like I was saying, is incredible. I have to stop talking about this. I don't want to. I want to read you the whole thing. This is a real photo of her. Oh, and she just like casually says that part of the way through, which, never forget, the most epic version of that was with this book, which I had to read for class, and we're reading it, and then all of a sudden we flip the page and our professor is on the page. This is Dr. Julie Stewart, and so that was awesome. Never again will something like that happen, but close cover reveal, Rebecca Solnit. How to Read Now is essays. It feels academic, not in a bad way, but in a really impressive way. It reminded me of 3 books that I wrote in the back. Say Nothing, with its heavy lifting. When you read a book and you're like, that did stuff. Say Nothing, I compared it to a freight elevator, I think. Then I compared it to Unshrinking. With its avalanche of intelligent argument, which, true, this one felt like climbing a mountain every chapter you read. Like, by the end, you're at the top of this thing she has built and assembled through paragraphs, which is like, I love a weight-bearing paragraph. And then How Did You Know Nothing? Oh, come on, babes. With its blend of wide-ranging research and specificity and like pulling from personal experience, pulling from random things you've never heard of, art you've never heard of, books or films you've never heard of, and also just applying like a really clear eye and a clear mind to those things. So it was great. If you're into film, you would like it. If you like thinking and you value critical thought, this is like your next like required read. I really think Teddy was right. She was like, you have to read it. Oops. Oh, I put Rebecca on the wrong path there. Okay, so basically April was an incredible month of reading, and I read a lot of fiction and then 2 really, really special nonfiction books. I now want to read more Rebecca Solnit, specifically the book that is talked about in High Heel, Her History of Walking. And she wrote one about communities in the aftermath of disaster called A Paradise Built in Something, A Paradise Built in Hell. And then she also has another one I wanted to read. Oh, Focus Child. Lane Castillo writes fiction. She has a book called America's Not the Heart and a book called Moderation that I've heard great things about from Olivia and Teddy. So that's the tea for April.